Welcome to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth, and we're here to preserve and promote culture in this benighted age, one weekly conversation at a time. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show through iTunes, or by plugging our RSS feed into your favorite podcatcher. You can find the RSS feed on our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/VM. We're also on Twitter and Instagram at VMSPod, at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com, and on Spotify, YouTube, and TuneIn.com by searching for Virtual Memories Show. If you like this podcast, please tell a friend and give it a mention on your favorite social media platforms. Also, please go to the iTunes store, look up the Virtual Memories Show, and leave a rating and maybe a review for us. That might just inspire Apple to promote us a little. Now, you can support the Virtual Memories Show and get access to exclusive content with a recurring monthly donation via Patreon. Just visit patreon.com/VMSpod and set up your level of support. You'll get new material from our patron-only blog, and you'll also get to listen to my quarterly bonus podcast, Fear of a Square Planet, which features extra material from our guests and is only available to supporters of the show. So visit patreon.com/VMSpod or paypal.me/VMSpod and help me continue to produce smart conversation about books, art, comics, and culture every week at the Virtual Memories Show. Well, I made it through 4 days of business meetings in New York, along with a pair of podcast sessions and oddball bumping into one of my past podcasts in Midtown. The business stuff generally went well, except for one bad meeting, but I was sort of expecting that one to go badly. It was offset by all the good ones, but of course I will manage to accentuate the negative, or at least mentally compose long, angry emails to the negative, but I won't send them. I will eventually let that stuff dissipate. The thing that was kind of weird, though, was how I approached those two podcasts I did during the week. One was in the evening after the first day of meetings, and I was kind of charged up / burned out, but still kind of loquacious. The conversation went really well. It just was a shift in tone for me to go from business meetings to sit in the hotel room to having this podcast for an hour and a half or so. The other one was 8:30 in the morning on day 3 before my meetings began. And I think all those days of business talk and schmoozing made me a little looser and even more loquacious. It helped that the guest and I sort of clicked, but I felt like I was more with it or more in command. I think as a result of having business meeting after business meeting for 3 days, not that I was forcing my pharma lobbying type agenda, in some sort of format into that podcast conversation, but just conversationally, I felt my tone was a little different than I was expecting it to be. Certainly. You'll have to check out those episodes. Let me know what you think. They are the ones coming in the next 2 weeks. The Monday evening episode will be the one with Mark Allen Stamedy, and the Wednesday 8:30 in the morning is David Shields. Meanwhile, we have a big guest for this week's show. Nathan Englander and I were supposed to connect about a year and a half ago when his novel Dinner at the Center of the Earth came out, but it never came together. But he's got a new novel out this week called Kaddish.com from Knopf. And we got together to talk about it. And what makes it even better about this conversation is that book is sort of a 20-year marker on Nathan's publishing career. But the novel itself, Kaddish.com, I loved. It's really a fun novel. It's about a Jew who tries to shirk his responsibilities and belatedly tries to reclaim them. Basically, 1999, lapsed Orthodox Jew's father dies. And the guy's sister insists that our lapsed Orthodox Jews say the mourner's prayer, that Kaddish, 3 times a day for 11 months, as is the custom. He freaks out at this responsibility. He's rebelling against his yeshiva upbringing, etc., which does mirror Nathan Englander's yeshiva upbringing. And he winds up finding a website, Kaddish.com, that he can outsource that duty to rabbinical students in Israel, and he gladly pays to have Kaddish recited for his old man. Again, that takes place in 1999. Most of the novel takes place in the present. I am not going to give away anything else about the plot because it takes some really interesting turns. Cottage.com, A, it's really enjoyable as a novel. B, it's really this wonderful study in how tradition and modernity collide and coexist. I mean, it has this whole universe of moral consideration, and it asks us how we can move forward and still respect everything that came before us. Now, I should note, I thought Nathan was setting up an Edgar Allan Poe sort of direction for this thing, but the novel goes in much weirder territory. I really loved Cottage.com. As I mentioned in the episode, I read it in a day, 50 pages in the morning, started it again after work. It's only 200 pages long, and I just went and went and went. It's different than his two previous novels, which were much longer and more substantive. But the first one, The Ministry of Special Cases, was about the disappeared in Argentina. And the second, that Dinner at the Center of the Earth, was about a prisoner in Israel whose existence was classified and also, in a sense, disappeared. It is to my great regret that I did not ask Nathan on mic whether this one is also about someone who has disappeared and isn't there, and whether that's a recurring thing for him. I did mention that question or that issue to him after we finished, and he thought it was a pretty perceptive question, which bums me out even further. Anyway, I wish we captured all that stuff on mic. I'm glad we got the time together. I'm really looking forward to people discovering Cottage.com once it rolls out this week. And, well, you're in for a conversation. As caveats go, we recorded at Nathan's friend's home in Brooklyn, so there's some standard New York noise, but also we were in the kitchen, and because it's tiled and a big space, that led to a bit of echo, but otherwise it's about it. Now here's Nathan's bio. Nathan Englander is the author of the story collections For the Relief of Unbearable Urges, an international bestseller, and What We Talk About When We Talk About Anne Frank, as well as the novels The Ministry of Special Cases and Dinner at the Center of the Earth. His books have been translated into 22 languages, and he is a recipient of a Guggenheim Fellowship, a Penn Malamud Award, the Frank O'Connor Award, the Sue Kaufman Prize from the American Academy of Arts and Letters, and was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize in 2013. His play, The 27th Man, premiered at the Public Theater in 2012. He is Distinguished Writer in Residence at New York University and lives in Brooklyn, New York with his wife and daughter. His new novel is Cottage.com, published by Knopf. And now, the Virtual Memories conversation with Nathan Englander. So novella. Is it a novella?
It's a novel.
It's a novel. Because I read it in 1.5 sittings, which to me is...
That is my goal. I built it for that.
And that's sort of my question, because some writers... I spent 6 years on this, and you read it in 1.5 hours. That sort of time put in versus time consumed.
Yeah, I think if you had a different plan for it, like I care about the experience of this read, and I think my novel. I can't believe I get to say this, but I could say my novel that came out last year or 1.5 years ago,
which is also something I want to get to. But yeah,
it's shocking for me. But Dinner at the Center of the Earth, which I'd been wanting to tell the story of the failed peace process in Israel-Palestine for 20 years, and to do it in a way that, where I want people to be able to enter into this really explosive subject and not have it be a lecture or, a heavy Middle East history. I basically built a magic realist political thriller novel, but I got very interested in that pacing of what it meant to build a world where you're just, turning the pages is for that speed, that hunger. And I guess, I don't know, it was such a departure and I learned so much from it. And I was like, what if I take where I am now and then I go back to where I began? And that's how it turned into this book where I'm exploring those things that are so, close to my heart and torture my neurotic soul. And then, yes, I built it so carefully. I mean, I'm compulsive, like I polish and rewrite. So yes, all the effort is there, but with the intent that I did want people to just laugh, 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 cry, to just be on this journey, with him. So yeah, it's the opposite. Yes, I could see people feeling that, but for me, it's thrilling when somebody be like, I sat down and read it last night, or I read it in 2 parts, or it
was 50 pages in the morning, and then after work, I'm like, let me just start. I'll have tomorrow to finish. Eventually, I was like, no, I'm just going to keep going, and 150 more pages. I was like, okay, that was a great and satisfying experience, and a very different one than your novels, which Dinner was that middle length sort of thing, but your previous novel was immense and had a lot built into it. Whereas this one, maybe it's just because of my own set of assumptions, I was able to groove right along with.
No, I really worked hard at that and thought about it and thought about books that work that way. Like I teach at NYU, and I literally was just screaming at them about this on Tuesday. It's so personal and so vulnerable and so raw. I mean, I'm, sitting up straight talking to you, but it's, the pressure of launch, of how much you want a book to get a chance in the world or a fair shot or whatever that means, so yes, there's this, again, completely raw, heartfelt, vulnerable, from the subconscious, pure thing. And I was like, but you're writing, you're allowed to be conscious. I tell them there are the conscious parts. So I wrote this book as if in a dream. It just came out of me. But I was like, then you sit with the chapter and say how's this sentence working? Was that a word rep? So on that notion, I was really thinking about how the pacing works and about short novels. I really was thinking of short novels that I love. And it's funny that you asked novella at the front, because this really is novel length. But I thought, if America really loves a book, if we really, really love it here, a short story becomes a novel.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Whatever it needs to be.
Most of our greatest books were like, oh, I love the novel, Old Man in the Sea. I'm like, it's about 19 pages long. These things, Catcher in the Rye, these are extraordinary, Animal Farm. You're like, these are pamphlets. You know what I'm saying? But if they go big enough, they get to crawl from story to novella to novel. But yes, it's longer than all of those, but it is, meant to be a short book. And and it wrote shorter, which was, this was its natural shape.
What sort of challenge was that for you?
An interesting one. I mean, everything I write is usually 3 times as long. So you say the Israel, I'm glad to say the Israel novel. You're like, okay, it's it's a novel-sized novel, that it's not long. It was, I have this 600-page version, before I get to the 300-page version, the 250-page version. And, in Argentina, I have, a 1,000-page version of the Ministry of Special Cases somewhere with notes and annotations. So, but, this one, it really, something snapped. I don't know that will happen again, but why I like writing, what's fun for me or what's so engaging is it always feels like the first book. It's always this new, unknown, terrifying, and exhilarating experience. This is the first novel that wrote the way I write a short story. They hold differently in your brain. And this one, I just had the whole thing, and I had the whole thing, and I paused for a second because it's embarrassing, but you came to talk to me, so I'm going to talk. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
A couple of Jews on a Friday afternoon.
Don't do it. Exactly. I wish we had a challah. But, it came like in a dream. I wrote it in 3 months. I usually do a first draft in 3 years. And again, I don't know if it took me another 2.5 years from then or 3 till we go to press, and rewriting and letting it sit and going back to it and all that stuff. But that was I didn't know a novel could come that way or feel that way. It was just a different experience, and that was fascinating. And I've heard all those apocryphal, probably writer stories where they're like, Faulkner was at the coal mill and he wrote As I Lay Dying overnight, or, Marquez, the family they were driving on some trip and he turned the car around and locked himself in the attic and wrote,
Well, I have the Bruce J. Friedman story from his memoir of going upstairs for a weekend, writes 4 short stories and sells all 4 to Playboy. A week later, $20,000 back in 1970 money. So basically he's just taking care of the kids and the house and everything else based on a weekend's load of work.
Yeah.
Different world where you could do that, different market.
And I even, I've been reading, I write plays now, or it's funny. or it's not funny. By the way, whenever
I'll find it funny.
Yeah. Well, whenever anyone says that, people say, I almost reflexively say, you tell me, I'll tell you if it's funny. Anyway, but I'm writing a second play now. I've written it, but anyway, it's not in production yet. But it's just, I do the second one because I say for like 10 years of my career, I had to tell people I write book. And then it's books and plays. I'd like the second play to get produced. So I could say books and plays. But I've just been devouring plays because that's how I learn. People are like, you should probably go see one. But anyway, but I read a lot of plays. I was reading Martin McDonagh, but I heard like a rumor that he, one of those stories, I don't even know anyone who knows him. Well, I guess I do know people who know him, but nonetheless, he's not in my circle. I don't know the playwrights really. But, that they said like, oh yeah, he wrote, on a long couple of weeks in in estate housing or whatever they call that in, England, and that
council
housing. Sorry. Thank you. Council housing, that he, wrote 17 plays, that kind of thing. Like that he wrote his whole oeuvre, dropped in a drawer, and then takes them out and rewrites them. Yeah. So I love those kind of stories of like fevered.
Well, was your
creation.
editor suspicious on this one? You know what?
Everyone, it's nice. It is a very hard way to live in a lot of ways. It's always scary. You never know what your future is, and your stock goes up and down if it even gets to go up and then go down and gets to go back up. I'm thankful every day to get to live a writing life. But the people I work with, it's, my editor, Jordan Pavlin, my agent, Nicola Raji, it's been my whole life. You know what I'm saying? At my first reading at KGB, on the way to moving from Iowa City to Israel, I stopped, say goodbye
as one does
to the family, and did my first public reading with Colin McCann.
Wow.
He's the first email I'm going to write as soon as this is over. Colin wrote today. Jordan and Nicole, like Nicole was my agent. She had Jordan waiting at the top of the stairs to introduce me to an editor. Like I've just been with them from day one, and they know me better than I know me, which is fine. Like my job is to do the work, and they, keep me in line. So I just thought the deal I had made first with Nicole was, I'm going to write this. I finally have an idea. Like I know how I want to do this Israel novel. It's so insane. Like I don't want to spend the 3 years polishing because it's so insane. I need you to see how insane it is and tell me if it's a book. And she's like, I'll read the crazy draft if there's no window. You know what I'm saying? Like I can't say like, I need to hear back from you in 2 weeks, or
hang yourself or
like that idea. Like it can't be me pacing, outside her office door being like, well, is it a book or not? I said, like, I'm going to write this crazy thing, in a fever, and I'm going to turn it into you, and you take your time, and I'll get to work on something else. Like, so the day I handed in, and this comes from a conversation with Philip Roth where he told me about, how he'd finish a book.
I hate you, by the way. No, just because of that, but yes, that's okay.
Exactly.
Go on.
Fair enough. But Philip had talked about, finishing a novel, and, he was bored within like an hour, and like that same day, like back to his desk, starting the next one. He really it was, the pressure he kept himself under, and we can talk about, life choices and, when he
what you give up and what you...
Yeah, he wouldn't let himself have kittens, which is hard, when he gave the kittens back.
I remember that story.
Yeah, so I'm saying that's he told me that story. So I'm saying, like, those are the things that really had an effect on me. The kitten story, my wife and I really, we think about that all the time. But that going back, I was like, you know what? Like, that's it. Like, you can just get right back into it. Like, that is... If the story is there and it's the time to work, like you should just do that. So I handed it to Nicole, and I went back to work the next day, and I thought I was, just fiddling with something, and it just took over. And so I didn't know what was happening. And then, I said I just worked like nonstop. I just, hammered, and it was just inside this story. And 12 weeks later, I had the first draft, which was, as I said, it's, 3 months instead of 3 years. But the point is, I had no idea, Nicole knew, and I think it was a nice surprise for Jordan. But, so it was, I had no idea that I was sitting down to write back-to-back books.
And in that short a time frame, was it weird at all for a publisher to have another book out a year and a half after the first?
No, they're so not... Jordan's amazing. Knopf is amazing. They're so supportive. I mean, I think that's probably what I was supposed to be doing. It's called a publishing schedule. Like after
again, we're not all Philip Roth.
Yeah.
I mean, he was putting out, you guys aren't all Philip Roth. He was putting out, especially in the end, those Nemesis books.
And you have to want, you have to want that pacing too. Like that's a lot of books, but, it's more, like, I'm not talking about the, book a year every year kind of thing. Like, Joyce Carol Oates, I love Joyce. Like, she does that. Letham's pretty fast, not that fast, but like people consistently. I have just been somebody, do this tortured artist thing. I don't believe in block. I don't get blocked. I just work compulsively and rewrite obsessively. And, it's just that idea that like if a book takes me 8 years, it takes me 8 years. But I think that was, after my first book, for me to just disappear for near a decade, that was, I really appreciate publishing support, no phones ringing, they basically had to, relaunch me, 10 years later, the funny guy has now written a super depressing, historical novel. Like they just backed me, but I'm saying this was really nice, for me to have a publishing schedule. And I think probably nice for them to be able to have just supported me. And here I am again.
Well, it's basically 20 years since your first collection. You've been publishing since before that.
Yeah, but I'm saying, this is March 26th, and that was April Fool's Day, 99.
Oh, wow. Okay, I didn't realize it was that close. I just figured it was 99. No. We're going to overlap somewhat. But do you see patterns in terms of either the work or, how you've approached things, or are you able to sort of look back on those 20 years, given that half of it was spent on a single book after that?
Yes. Trust me, I love to do the math now. I'm sure I told Jordan and Nicole and everyone else, like, with this one, I was like just under the wire by 4 days. I like end up with a book every 4 years. I just changed
like the Olympics or elections. But
exactly.
The Olympics are a better one.
Yes. But I just changed the pace considerably with this one. So the average is looking much better. But patterns in the
how do you look back, or even at the expectations you had 20 years ago? What you thought you were getting versus who you became.
Yeah. No, themes, like I can step away now and see what my obsessions are and see what, each book is a new universe to me, is me finally figuring out how to write. It's always my first book. It's always brand new. It always is, pushing me as far as I can go. Like that's what writing is. And then I can step back and say, like Sacred and Profane, or Gray Space, or Doublings, or people who, sudden shifts of character, like flips, this kind of, like, I'm aware of thematic concerns that run through everything that just drive me, that aren't in my front brain when I'm composing, or are not something I think about when I sit down to write.
Has anything gotten easier or harder in terms of the writing?
Yeah, well, process is process. It's like going to the gym. I mean, if you the routine is what builds the muscle. I think I am. Is it possible that I'm a little less tortured? I doubt it. I think I'm probably equally tortured. I think it's just if you've done it enough times and you know it, that I can I call it like letting the tape run or something like that. Like if you're despairing at week 7, like if I've written, whatever it is, 20 or 30 stories and 3 novels, or, like that idea, like if at every one of those cases over the years that, on week 7 of a new idea, I'm despairing, then I'm like, okay, so despair. Now keep working.
And I guess that's sort of the pattern question I was wondering about. Are there those things you recognize with, this happens to me every time, and I need to...
Yes. Oh, those patterns are extraordinarily clear to me. Mm-hmm. Yes, these, the parts that you're just...
Thanks to therapy, or is it all actually from your own observations?
It can be both, but no, from my own... No, from writing process. You know what? I would replace therapy with teaching. I find it really nice to have to put things into words. Like there's these, I thought, I have, all this experience, a bajillion hours, day after day, year after year of like just hammering and working and spending time on this. And you learn all this stuff, but you don't it doesn't necessarily have to take form or be, something that you can actually explain. But when you're standing in front of a class, like I have to tell them, this is why I do this, why I think you should do this, or this is what's happening here. And it's really made the process clear to me. And having actual language attached to those things, it often just pops up in the same kind of language in my head when I'm working. You know what I'm saying? Like that thing where I'd say, to a class, oh, you're freaking out? Well, it's a process, and this is draft 3. And if it's a 7-draft story, you can't go from 3 to 7. You just don't even worry, right? You'll get there. Like those notions, and I can give myself my own advice at my desk in a really clear manner.
Those Paris Review Writers at Work interviews help when you were younger? Or was that or was it too schematic?
I didn't read those when I was younger. It's the one that I did read it. This is years ago when I was writing my first play. A friend gave me a collection of the Playwright interviews, and those were just fantastic. So those really helped.
Yeah. I was scattershot, which is part of why I'm a failure of a writer. But
not so. But the Playwright ones were really, those helped a lot. I like those. Yeah, no, I love writers on writing on, whenever that comes up. I love that kind of wisdom, and I've been very fortunate, which is, it's more getting to study with people, that just shape me.
Freak out moments meeting writers who you idolized in the either do or don't meet your heroes sort of way? Was there anyone you were dumbstruck around or embarrassed yourself with? That's when you ask about time changing. I mean, seeing career as career is a really good lesson. So that's it. You don't understand what it is until you're in one. That's the point where, everything looks charming from the outside often, even, very dramatic lives, and everything looks charming in hindsight, and people seem made for the reality they end up with. And you don't see the struggle, you don't see whatever, if we were talking about Philip, whatever decade it was like, before, he wrote his trilogy in, I guess, his 60s, there's ups, there's downs, you're super famous, like that stuff. It's good to see there's only the work, like nothing else really, matters. Like that idea, like when I was studying with Marilyn Robinson, she was 12 years from housekeeping, 14 years from housekeeping, like that idea where she's become, then her trilogy comes out and she wrote those so fast, they just appeared, they didn't just appear. It's like a process. It's a life. And watching someone like that, that's a good lesson. She's just spends her life reading and thinking and, and preaching and helping others and, making just beautiful work. It's like, it is truly a life of the mind, and a good lesson of what you should be investing in. The people whose work you read are the ones who are home doing their work. There's not, they're not at the parties. They're just, if you love writing, that's what you're going to be doing. So, there's a lot of people, keep my head on straight. But about being dumbfounded, early on, I mean, were you at a party where you had the holy shit?
Like a friendship, with Philip, like the first time he reached out or the first time I met him, that's somebody who, when I was a religious kid in suburbia, in a pretty cloistered world, to discover that work was a really big deal for me. Like to eventually meet him or talk about his work or talk about my work, that was a very strange historical circle. But there's, I currently live in New York, and
nowadays everybody's Joe.
Well, I'm just saying saying I get the list of people that I get, yes, it's still, I don't ever not think it if I see, Don DeLillo or Marilyn and say, hello, Don, hello, Marilyn,
that sense of being a peer.
Nah, I don't.
I know you don't think you're a peer because of imposter syndrome.
But not at all. But I'm saying these, really are living, giants, and it's just, just saying you get to know people, and that's, I'm never not aware. I'm still never not aware of certain things. I still feel like a little kid from suburbia, so I'm old now and rickety, but like that feeling never goes away. So, but yes, it's quite normal to be in the world that is the writing world of New York, but it is, there have been people I've had the good fortune of meeting where you're like, that's pretty strange person to meet.
Yeah, just the afterwards having the, holy crap, that was person X.
Yeah. And that everyone just makes work. Like that's the good real lesson, is these people just like what they're doing is doing their work. Yeah. I have to say.
And when you talk about this book being a sort of full circle, or at least coming back, being novel that is approaching some of the short stories from the beginning.
Can you expand on that? That's origin. You know, I'm just starting to talk about the book, and I don't even know how to put a finger on it yet, but it was just I spent a lot of time alone because we were taping. I didn't bring the dog with me, but she's.
I'm
with
a dog
me.
person. It's okay.
Yeah, we could get a floor mic, but a pant.
It's your pant.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it would sound like, especially today. It's a hot one today, but just I know the way around the inside of my brain, and all I can tell you, it's like. I mean, that's also, you asked about time. Like, you sort of learn how your own synapses fire. And I've gotten interested, as a religious kid, I'm very religious about things.
How so?
I think the process is holy. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's it. You know what? Like, that's it. The real writers that I grew up with that I get to meet as an adult. That's what we're talking about. People who are older than me, who you're like, oh, I read you and now I'm like, you exist. You know, that moment, breaking, through that wall was really interesting, but I didn't even think, I thought I couldn't be a writer because I didn't think writers were regular people. You know what I'm saying? It's the process is holy to me. The books are holy to me. Literally it happens so rarely now, but like if I drop a book on the floor, like, if it's late at night and
you have to fast for 40 days?
No, I kissed the cover by accident. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's how religious it is to me. So, it's, there's a point where creativity has that aura to it. Like, where does story come from? How do you figure out something? I'm working on a problem today. I've been working on it all week. How am I ever going to figure it out tomorrow, since I know everything? I made up the whole world. There's like the moment you figure something out is so shocking, because how could you possibly have figured it? How could you solve that problem since you created everything? Like, there's nothing that could have come up that I don't already know, because it's my brain and I already know everything about this because I built everything in it. Has a religious element to it. And then it's something,
sort of a Kabbalah/Gnostic side to it, which is good. Don't get me wrong. I'm down with that level of mysticism.
I don't know if it's like, chicken or egg thing. Like, I don't know if I was, trained up to choose this world, but that idea of something you do that's outside of time, that you do every day, that you are obligated to do whether you want to or not, like, yeah, that's all built into the process. But back to the question of like story and this feeling, I got really interested in the like chemistry of creativity, of like dissociative states of consciousness and subconscious, and how the writing actually happens, like chemically, So I'm saying that there's a certain way an idea feels, and the way a short story gets written for me, and all I can tell you is a novel has always felt different, by the sheer size of them, by the breakdown of the pacing, by the length of them. You hold them in your head differently. And this one just came differently, like a story, but I don't know how to say what that is yet.
Is there a point, have you identified a point where something's done? A friend of mine is a former student of yours, and that was one of his big questions. Is when exactly does he know that something's finished? Because he talks about writing stories that have gone on 200 pages and then end up, much smaller. And Zach Martin is the former student. So he and I went to high school together for a year and stayed in touch. So
awesome.
I did let him know I was getting together with you, and he said, "Oh, well, ask him this." He also had one other mean-spirited one. But anyway, go on.
I often talk about it like a game of Jenga. You can't just pull out one block and say you won, and you can't pull out all the blocks and a tip over and say you won. I was like, there's the, where you remove everything that can come out and you put your fingers on the last one that'll tip it, and then you let go. It's like there is, one word too many and it's ruined. One word too short and it's I really do believe in ideas of perfection and ruination, and books are supposed to be what they're supposed to be. And as for typos or, a missing comma, something like that, I do believe things are made by human hands, and that there's a beauty to a crafted human thing, like, that too perfect is its own kind of imperfect because it's robotic, like, so yes, I really do have ideas of perfection and getting there. And I think you learn to listen to the work. The story will always make its own demands. When you have a great line you want to put in and it doesn't fit because the story doesn't want it, when I really, it's not about time, because if a book needs 50 years, I would give it 50 years. If you give it 50 years in a day, you've lost your mind. So I really feel like each thing makes its own demands and has its own time length. But in terms of it being done, when you can live with it for the rest of your life, when you would never change a word or a letter, like people, I'm so neurotic and everything tortures me. And yet you're able to find satisfaction with works of art that you make. Yes, because I won't let it go. Like when you actually sell a book when it's published, like they own it. And then a reader, if they want it, buys it or takes it from the library that has bought, like it is literally not mine anymore. I'm building it and finishing it. And when I let it go, like that's the point. I drive everyone. We can get Jordan, on the phone. Like I drive her nuts. Like honestly, I can't tell you how many people were involved in the question of one comma in the author's bio that somebody sends to me. They just send that to me to check. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It's not like, some like that comes in a PDF. Yeah. Someone's like, is this bio good? Like I will literally have, a dozen people that I'm torturing about if this comma should stand. But that's the point. When I am finished, that is, I so stand by it. I would never change a word of anything. Yeshiva education help in any appreciable way in terms of close reading? Yes. That's where time changes. I'm surely like a lot more appreciative of that education as time goes by in a clearer sense. Are there aspects of it that you see benefiting who you became, even though... Yeah. Like I think about how I, used to talk about it when I was just a few years away and just out. You know what I'm saying? Like, but, again, if you're rebelling against high school, as they can't see our gray hair over here, but like, you know what I'm saying? I'll take pictures after. If I'm talking about the big game or whatever, it's like time to let that stuff go, the glory and the failure or whatever it is, whatever your high school was. It's okay to move on at some point. But, no, it's funny because I was doing an interview and we were out there, we went out to the town where I grew up and I like met the new principal of my grade school. Like we're just walking, but we bumped into, showing them the school. But it was, it was just like so nice to be. I was like, you guys did right by me. You know what I'm saying? Like that idea, I don't know, though I did like my grade school education, parts of it were grand. That was nice. Yeah. But even my, high school rebellious self, which was the most boring kind of rebellion, not, drugs or wildness or what, it's just, theological questioning is such a yawn, but so passionate and painful for me. But, like I'm very thankful. I'm very thankful for, the world of stories, for the, understanding how these frameworks work, a world of rules, however restrictive or suffocating that can be to you if you don't get some of them, but a book is, has a beginning and an end, whether you're reading it digitally or yes, I'm sure someone's going to, I'm sure there's, 100 books that are meant to be circular that you can read through and all that stuff. But nonetheless, they really do start and end in time and space. They are not infinite, like it's framed worlds. They're, the characters have their boundaries, the stories have their rules. And I really think, the extreme structure that I grew up with is really there in my imagination, for detail, for continuity, for things like that. It obsesses me. Yeah, I was going to say your fiction, I don't mean it in a derogatory way, but there's structure to everything. There's spatiality to everything. It's very much a constructed world in a positive way, that it's, a world that actually is feasible, where streets turn corners, et cetera. I'm upset. I mean, again, in this book, it is, it's the scenes where he's trying to find that. It's a very special. Yes, he's searching for a place, and there's a pretty mystical street in the hidden spaces, but I mean the maps that I sit with, just
Yeah,
the
things correspond to a coordinate system.
To imagine they have to make sense. Like, that was stuff that I'm doing, that I'm, pulling out handfuls of here in the final draft. If you walk down the thing, like, and on, you make a left here and then it's a right, like, that's not okay. Like, the reader has to enter an unbroken dream. The reader shouldn't be bumped. Whatever your reader's reading for, if you know what I'm saying? Like, I get to read Cormac McCarthy and devour it. Like, a horse person also needs to be able to read Cormac McCarthy and devour it. You know what I'm saying?
That's the question. I'm coming from the inside. Do you feel Gentiles get your fiction? Do you feel I just don't know, because I'm not as trained as you. I don't have as much of a background Jewishly as you, but it's still I know as a Jew where he's coming from on this, but I have no idea if...
Well, but this is the point. So this gets to like politics and modern America or the modern world and racism and anti-Semitism, and whatever day you play this will be a violent day, but it's been an extraordinarily nightmarish violent day of just
waking up to that this morning.
Against,
we're recording this the morning of the mosque attacks in New Zealand.
Yeah. A true horror what's going on. And this is, it's about, I think, outside of story and inside of story, it's about empathy. Like, that's the point. That's why fiction is subversive. That's why they probably shouldn't have had me reading books if they wanted me to be religious, because you read other things and you say these people are human too, or this way of life is valid too. So I think it's only connected to certain communities or cultures or books at given moments where people ask that question in that way. So yes, this book, it's almost shocking for me to say, this is my most Jewish book. It can't get any more Jewish than this book is Jewish. But guess what? I think it's my most universal story. Like, I didn't write, I'm very, good for the bands that, have a hit song from when they were 17 and you're singing it at 90. That's awesome. Yeah. Like, that's a dream. There's so many ways to have success that are dreams, but like, I love the people who are so dedicated. I just, someone recently came up, for the relief of unbearable urges for 20 years, someone's like, super, that's their book. Like, I'm writing like, well, I'm saying, this is the book. Like, you want, I'm thrilled when they're like, oh, it's just, as a writer, you want different people to have a different their book, because you know, like, that's the idea. You want to grow as a writer, so to me, this feels like the book that I've been waiting my whole life to write. And what I'm saying is, it better be universal. You enter into a story, like, we always read far into ourselves. So I don't understand, like, if you pick up like I, Robot, Isaac Asimov, nobody says like, I've never been to Mars, I'm not a robot. Like,
how can I sympathize with these characters?
Like, how can you read, like, I Game of Thrones, like, I don't have a dragon. Like, everyone seems able, literally, I haven't taken a poll. Many people seem to be able to watch Game of Thrones or read the books who don't have a dragon. You know what I'm saying? If you can make the leap, it'd be like, this is what it's like, to be mother of dragons. Like, great. So that's the point. That's what we do when we read. And I don't think, back to like my super dedication, to Maryland, that people say like, oh, I don't live in the Middle West. Can I read an Iowa book? Or I'm actually not a clergyman. Can I read a,
I have this when I push off The Leopard on people, that Giuseppe Lampedusa novel. Yeah. It's you will have awesome. No basis of direct correspondence with this character, and yet you will understand what it's like to be a man with a family who knows his life and his way of life is going to pass.
Yes.
And that's universal.
That's it. Story better be universal. If you can't just open and read and it is not unpacked for you, if it's not universal, you have failed. Like, so it's on me. So I'm saying it better work on both ends, which is someone who's connected to it better feel proprietary. That's the compliment. You know what I'm saying? And then, but also someone, that's what's moving to me when the couple of times I've like toured in Norway, like, that's beautiful. Like, this is not a Jewish audience mainly, in the main come to see me. And like that, every word of the book can be replaced with a word in another language, and people will come out like, that's beautiful to me. But I like, especially in this moment of, real hatred and real divisiveness that people are working to spread. I was like, I'm even more, defensive or not defensive, just sensitive or want to unpack the question of like, can someone read this book? Like, it's about people. It's about human beings. Like, that's the point. Like, if if you can't connect with a Jew as a human being, don't read the book. But that's a whole separate problem.
Yeah, at that point, it's not simply an issue with what you're writing or how you're writing.
So that's what I'm saying. But the idea that you wouldn't pick it up for that, like everyone's welcome to their taste or whatever. But there's, as I said, there's certain things to be like, oh, do I want to read a gay novel? I always use James Baldwin as the example where like he's just James Baldwin. Like if yes, he should be embraced by community, but that idea, if you make him be gay or you make him be black, like you lose him. He gets to be both. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And he's also James Baldwin. He's also a hero of an African American writer, but he's an American writer to me. You know what I'm saying? Or an expat, like whatever. They all better shift categories, and what matters to me is the world. Yeah, and it's like Roth, the other Roth. I'm not a Jewish American writer. I'm an American writer, and people can debate that, etc. Yeah,
but
I
his
get
own conception.
That. It's really a thing. I think I've already spent too much time talking about it. I think why it's so intense, or why I like glom onto it, or focus on it, or want to unpack it, is because if you absorb certain things, you can't do your work. Because I've never written a word about a Jewish person. Like I just tell stories about people. Mm-hmm. The normal way to be, like, what I'm saying? It's not weird. Be like, oh, I'm having a Jewish interview. Like, we're just two people talking about literature. That is what this is. It's not a Jewish interview. It's two people talking about books. Like the idea, if anyone wants to say, oh, there's two Jews on my, in my phone, on my podcast, like whatever, knock yourself out. But I'm just saying this is what the universe is to me. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? That's a complete universe, and that's what I see from inside my own head. So I think I'm always like jumpy about it and I think that's maybe back to, the thing you're saying with Philip, which is, why I can't see myself as a hyphenate. That's weird. Like it's like it's making myself seeing myself as other, which is a lot of the stuff people are fighting for. You know what I'm saying? Like that's the point. You just get to be a CEO. You don't have to be a woman CEO. Like that's the point. Asking people to see themselves as outliers is bizarre, or not bizarre. It's not bizarre and it's not accidental. It's meant to make people feel other. Right. I did feel bad because it's the week before you is an Australian Holocaust novelist named Bram Presser, then you, and then Boris Fishman. So it does seem like I do have sort of a type going on right now, but I'm trying to diverge. And that's the thing to embrace. One can read, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's the point. I love, like, and that's the thing. From the outside, I'm allowed to make that box. Like that's, I love all kinds of books. I read so insanely weirdly, now even across genre, it's crazy, what I pick and choose with neither rhyme nor reason. It just follows some weird reading sense of what fits. Which I'll ask you at the end. Yeah. That'll be the, but my point is, I love my Jewish authors. Like I get to love that, same as I love the Russians, or I love a certain feel. There is obviously, that's the point, and, is a cultural feel to things that is super heartwarming to me. Yeah. Who were the writers who helped guide you initially out of the religious life and into your secular one, and then into your life as a writer? It's not literature that pulled me out, but it sort of rescued me. That's what I'm wondering. Just sort of either guided or shepherded, or were just there as you found hungry. Your way. And again, I probably read a much more balanced way now as well. You could say Catholic, which would be funny, but go. Exactly. But exactly, small c. Yeah. Catholic in my tastes. But, Kafka, Camus, Conrad, Roth. I was reading, Asimov then in high school. Kurt Vonnegut. I don't know. That was the early. It's a good set of usual suspects. Yeah, in high school, that's what would, that whatever was in the West Hempstead Public Library, Mm-hmm. Do you ever feel nowadays that book changed my life? When you're reading something that, okay. You're still capable of having that knock the hell out experience of reading something? Absolutely. Yeah. Do you remember the last time, it's just. Was it just yesterday? I still get so excited when I love a book, and I learn so much, and it can just, it can even be. That's true. For you, there's going to be increments of change my life. For me, it was more like The Leopard or Chess Story of Zweig and things like that were just, holy crap, I'm 40-something years old. No, like reading, like I was just thinking, like it would be like reading, Grace Paley's, Goodbye and Good Luck, that story, or reading, Singer's Spinoza of Markets. Yeah, like those kind of stories where you're like, oh, I'm just different now. I love those experiences, but This feels like the video store question back when there were video stores where somebody would call and be like, I'm at the video store, what should I get? And all you can think of are like Star Wars and Saturday Night Fever. You'd be like, Grease? Are there any more movies?
That was pretty much the high point for you.
So now I'm just like trying to think, what I devoured lately that was, but it's always Discover for me. I read Handmaid's Tale for the first time after the show, I
still haven't read it. I've never read it.
Oh, good. So you're with me.
Yeah.
I just read it and I was like, it has a epigraph. I mean, these are like crafty things. I'm like, this shouldn't work, but this really doesn't fit, but it actually makes the whole book hold together, or something like straight, practical, like John Caryou's Bad Blood, the story of like Theranos.
Yeah. My day job, that's a thing that I deal with. I have people who are completely obsessed with the Theranos story. So So literally like reading that book where I'm like, I make my students read that. I'm like, look at this straight reporting. Like there's one sentence lined up in front of another, like, cause he was writing for the Wall Street Journal. It wasn't, he wasn't writing a drama. He was filing it a story. I was like, here is this extraordinarily clean story where the facts are lined up one in front of the other. And I was like, you are going to stay up all night and devour this book, which is a metaphor for our current, administration, literally. Except this one was actually based on science, even though it was bullshit science. At least there was supposed to be some, good coming out.
Yeah.
But actually, could you have written Dinner at the Center of the Earth during this administration? And where the peace process is now versus where it was in the end of the Obama years?
Oh, yeah.
Do you look at the book and think, wow, I couldn't have...
No, it's... Yes, the message stays the same for me. Yeah. I needed the time. I needed to get, I needed the, whatever it was, 15 years in between the moment. I needed that distance. Because as despairing, as horrible as it looks now, I mean, 2 missiles flew in yesterday. And again, I'm not, there's 2 sides to this, extraordinarily pressured story. And why I wrote the book is because, I feel like it's become so broken, the peace process, and so toxic, and nobody on either side seems to really be trying to make it happen. I mean, in the government's talking about it, that there are good people who are working towards that.
On an institutional level, it's intended to keep
hopeless, an endlessly hopeless cycle. And I'm finally old enough, like, I just want people to know it was right there. Like it really was happening, like that's like, it's hard to explain the feeling on the street. It's hard to explain the historical moment. Like just because a few people destroyed the whole thing doesn't mean
negate what was actually. Yeah. How's Israel changed for you? How often do you go back? Or how often do you go?
My family goes a lot. I really don't.
I haven't been since my bar mitzvah in 84, so I've got tons of family
This
there,
was the first book that I didn't go for was Dinner at the Center of the Earth. But I went for a book tour last time, 6 years ago. Mm-hmm. So it's just loaded for me. It's really loaded. I'm heartbroken over it. I wish everybody peace. And I don't think this is a sustainable way for, either side to continue on. I just wish everybody well. And that's, but that's the point is I feel like it feels so intractable. That's why I built this book of opposites. I just wanted people to reflect on their feelings, to just think about how they think, because there has to be some motion on both sides. Like that's the whole point. Both sides are going to have to.
So we keep telling ourselves.
Make sacrifices, I think, and I'm one of the people who believes in 2 states. Some people don't believe in that anymore at all. Some people want one, joint state, To me, that seems the ideal.
Some people want the status quo for, as we said, for their own machine that just keeps going on its own. Did you ever have issues traveling to, Germany? I know you've lived in, but some of the
just for a few months.
Holocaust countries, basically.
Do I have issues?
Did you have issues with traveling to those? Are there ones you have or haven't gone to?
We didn't have any money growing up. I mean, we weren't, I spent most of a year in Malawi, a couple of years with my wife, so I'm very careful about never using the word, people throw the word poor around when we are, so wealthy, right. It's so much more, a lovely, I was, well fed in at different points. But anyway, anyway, I was going to make fun of Ashkenazi food, but we won't do that for an hour. I'm just saying we didn't have travel money. We were in a family who went on.
Oh, but even
so I'm saying my junior year, which was a huge thing that I, fought to get to and was able to like make happen, and and my family was able to make financially happen. It was really like an amazing, life-changing year for me. But at the end of that year, with Edith Frankel, this wonderful professor, I'd taken a course on the Habsburg Empire. That class gave me the idea for my story, The 27th Man, which really changed my life. But also we went on a tour. The wall had just come down. I was in Jerusalem when the wall came down. It was 89, 90. So, I was there from summer to summer. And then in 90, we went to, very soon after the wall came down, we went to Poland and, Czechoslovakia and Hungary and, West and East Germany, those countries. I was going to say, the map has completely, it's just crazy to be like, I'm so old that like.
I was explaining to a high school kid the difference between our impending climate destruction and what we grew up with you never knew. Yeah. There could have been nuclear Armageddon. We just would have disappeared without any knowledge that anything was going on.
Yes.
That was in the back of our heads our entire childhoods and lives. But I understand this is worse because we all see it coming and it's going.
Well, I would like us to say, this maybe gets back to something that goes in the writing, which is I always like see myself as a pessimistic optimist or vice versa. But I'm like, yes, it's so terrifying. And I feel like we can save the planet, Again, will be great damage, but that we can, make radical change. And like if people come together, it's just, we have such a, extraordinary failure of empathy right now and such, embarrassing is better than horrible. Like, the horror is clear, but just such embarrassing leadership, so if I do think, if I talk about that time in, Southern Africa, but like that idea of like being, having gotten to go to South Africa from Malawi, like a country like that where, it just takes a Mandela, like to, the idea of peace being made there, like post-apartheid, not only to end apartheid, but to do it peaceably. Like, it's just with extraordinary leadership and bravery, and the bravery of, people on both sides, you can really do unbelievable things.
Mm-hmm. You did, how'd the experience in Malawi affect you? It was something that Zach had actually brought up, but he wasn't 100% sure that you'd spent the time there or somewhere else, so he didn't want me to embarrass myself. But how did that?
Oh, hugely. It's I mentioned it with James Baldwin, but there's a reason so many, I think, writers whose work I absolutely love live time abroad or spend time as expat. When you're dreaming of realities, to have your own reality be foreign, it just makes you aware of everything. Like, we're sitting at a friend's table, like, I don't know what, like I could be like, oh, is that how, there's some, whatever, like looking at a glass and be like, oh, that's what you use for a drinking glass here. Like, this is how you, I don't know what, this is how we shop. This is how we do laundry. This is how you walk to school. Like the idea of having to learn how to do everything, having to just maneuver your day to day. I don't know what, it's really good for my brain. It really keeps me hyper aware of everything, of how weather works, of how plants grow, of, looking out the window and instead of the rat that ran by me last night, I was going to say, like, I literally wrote our friends because there's this one spot on Green Avenue where all the rats are. I was like, it's spring. The giant rats are out. You know what I'm saying? But instead of looking out the window and seeing a giant rat and a, pigeon, I see like whatever, a bonobo monkey, like that's just like, okay, instead of a pigeon on my windowsill, a monkey sitting there eating a banana, like, well, that's too simply, we're up on a plateau, but I'm just saying more, just
signs and signifiers are different.
Just, where the sun is in the sky and, just what I see, flora and fauna and and the smell of things and, how we cook, just maneuvering that world. It was so lovely because I was remembering a Jerusalem long gone, and a Berlin and France, imagining these places that are part of my brain, but that's my own reality. And it like triangulated. I wasn't home, and I was in one world that was stranger to me and more foreign and more different than the one that I was imagining, which is so close to my heart, but I was building it in my head. And that contrast of, like, as I said, looking out over the Zomba Plateau to write, just seeing a world that was so different than any world I'd ever seen, it was great. And again, as for the place, like, I root for that country. I feel super attached to that country. I wish the people of Malawi well. It's the challenges they felt. It was so, extraordinary. We had food and we had a home. It is, it was on the edge of famine when I was there. It was, I've seen violence before, but that kind of human suffering, and a lot of it wrought by climate change, it is staggering. So we talk about everyone saying, like, even this notion like, oh, what the world will be, or what the world
it's
will
already
be.
there. Yeah,
those people are starving now.
I think Johannesburg's a city that already had zero water.
Oh, it was Cape Town.
Was it Cape Town? Okay, I knew it was. In my culturally imperialist way, I screwed that up.
It didn't shut off, but it was on the edge.
Yeah,
they were like a few days from.
But we'll be okay because we have Hudson Yards.
Yes,
we can just go to the rich enclave over there.
Yeah.
Yeah, supposedly it'll be completely, when the apocalypse hits, they'll be getting their own power and water.
Really?
That's the whole Snowpiercer thing they're building over there. So another mutual pal, although you may not remember him, a guy who interviewed you for Interview, Christopher Ballin.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Okay, I hit him up because I was reading it thinking, I recorded with Chris a few years ago. He wanted to know, does your relationship to literary inspiration change as you get older? Do you still, and it's sort of a thing with the, holy crap, this book changed my life. Do you still find, or does your ability to get inspired by different writers, has that evolved?
Yeah.
Is it more refined now in different ways?
I'm just figuring that out now. Like something's changed. As I said, I think that's probably one of the things that spurred me to write Dinner at the Center of the Earth. Like I said, I just was to write it. I was like, I better read some thrillers. You know what I'm saying? I thought wow.
How much genre reading do you do generally compared to
zero
literary fiction?
Zero. That's the point. And I feel like I was like, and I had such a great time. And I was like, don't be such a weirdo or a snob.
It's just snobbistry.
Like yeah. So it's like, I'm reading if I like a book, I'm reading much more broadly and so much more nonfiction. Like I'm obsessed with nonfiction lately. I don't know if that's like a dad gene as you get older, where you're like, I just need to carry like fat nonfiction books around.
About World War II. But go on.
Yeah, literally. So that's it. I'm like, I don't know enough about the Desert Fox. I gotta read some Rommel. Things. But but
recognizing those inspirations or those influences, I guess.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm definitely conscious of all that, but I think it's just weirder. I think knowing everyone, I've been thinking lately of what it is to like know the community, what it is when reading, which friends, when it can fall away and how that affects your reading.
In terms of friends who are writers who you...
Yeah, you end up like, just trying to keep up. It's, out of love and loving their work and stuff like that. But I'm just saying about consciousness falling away. I'm interested in thinking of the writer as a person. Like when I find a book of a writer, I've never heard the name before. I never met the person, like the way you enter into it. I'm just interested in that of like, well, I guess it's like, the
more you know the writer, how difficult is it for you to segment writer from the book?
Well, there's the fun things when you're reading a book and you're like,
these are things that they...
I know why he does. Like I was there for that. Like that's fun, but, I don't, I'm not, I'm just conscious of the consciousness. Again, if a book's functioning, you fall away in a second, but I'm just interested in that diving in moment of what it is to think of a person or more to think of writing as a thing that we do that, that there's a publicity side and a business side. And that's the stuff I work really hard to just try and forget.
And yet you're stuck here with some Jew from New Jersey who's just got a couple of microphones. And
no. The part of trust me, I'm always thankful to talk. I'm just saying there's what I think is I'm saying one has to be really, it's lovely to live in New York as a writer, and you have to avoid static. You know what I'm saying? Just as reader and writer. Yeah. That's the point of this lovely house. We all, everyone working who comes, I work at home, I work here, I work at NYU, but that idea where it's everyone's doing their own thing, recognizing that you're in the world and your book, you're living your life and you're having your reading life. I don't know. It's super enriching to be part of a community, and there can be static around you that you have to avoid the static. I have to say underline this is it's a really, I have to say, other times in history might be nastier or backstabbier, or, who knows, maybe it's meaner if you live in London or, I don't know, Bangalore. Just pick a spot on the planet. I don't know each writing community, how it goes. All I'm just saying is we really support each other. It's really just loving across, I feel, intergenerationally, just my peer group. There's a lot of support. I feel like we really do root each other on. It is quite lovely. I think about that a lot at launch time, where I'm whatever.
As opposed to the Norman Mailer threatening to punch someone out at a party sort of days.
Stabbing his wife.
Well, yeah, there's that
too. That's, yeah. But,
it gets another Bruce J. Friedman story where he tried to challenge Bruce to a fight. Bruce was maybe 1.5 feet taller and a workout fiend, and Mailer thought he could, take it. They ended up going outside, and he ended up trying to bite Bruce's arm off. And it was ridiculous Mailer stories, but
I'm gonna go get my Bruce J. Friedman down upstairs.
Oh yeah, the memoir Lucky Bruce. Good. According to one of his sons, they ran with they printed the wrong version.
Right.
Yeah, there's supposed to be another one. So the E version's allegedly the correct typography, the correct text. But either way, it's entertaining stories of Bruce. He was one of my early Mount Rushmore accomplishments with the podcast. I got through 3 of his sons, and each one got me closer to Bruce, and then the last one finally got me to him. And it was 5 years ago now. The show just piles up for me. What self-sabotaging habits do you have as a writer? What things do you recognize you're sabotaging yourself?
Oh, infinite. Yeah. I'm mildly tortured. I'm a worrier, so that's all.
Yeah.
Work-wise, I dig in. I'm disciplined.
That's what I want. Do you have things where you just, let me just look up these cat videos on YouTube and when you talk about the years in process, I'm aware of the part of the process where you're supposed to look out the window. I don't even get mad. If you're that's the idea. If your brain wants to watch cat videos for 20 minutes, it's doing something. Back to me believing in that there's something going on behind it.
Yeah, subconscious, whatever it is, you're just warming up or calming down. None of that bothers me because I really am, I use my writing time to write, and I'm a parent now, so I have time responsibilities that are more framing,
How old's your kid?
4.
Okay.
So distinctly framing, I come in and crack my knuckles and type, so that's it. When there were more hours to look out the window for more hours, I would look out the window for more hours. But that stuff I don't bother myself with. I think it's more some sort of traditional protective worry, as if that's going to do anything. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's just vulnerable making. I mean, this book is, it's, you've read it. It's crazy. You know what I'm saying? I hope it's fun. Or not even I hope it's fun. I don't dismiss it at all in that way. Because honestly,
it is a fun and entertaining read.
That's right. It's supposed to be fun, but it's my heart and soul. You know what I'm saying? There's a real, I am exploring something in there. That's what I do. When I write these things, they're really heartfelt for me. And it's really raw and vulnerable to put it out there. And I think, I find that, being out there is challenging. so thankful for the, any opportunity. I'm just saying, like, I really worry a lot because I care a lot about it. So I don't know what to do about that, but that is surely self-sabotaging, the amount of worry I invest into things that are outside of your control. Yeah. And I used to play a former student, Rivka Galchin, who's a wonderful writer, but I always credit her with, us playing this game where we call it like sort of, I feel like she said it once or what, but I call it a game now, like which of your heroes didn't die in the gutter? Like this notion that you're even living a writing life. I did an event recently and said on stage, like, it's almost an insult to be up here. Like the idea of having any recognition in your lifetime is probably a very bad sign, like for your work. Like this idea that people whose work I love, I'm saying, Dostoevsky's, in front of the firing squad or the gulag or in the drunk tank, I'm saying, like these people's lives were, a mess, like, or in terms of recognition, so, like he was a writer in his life, like some people had no recognition. Like nothing means anything but the work, and you need to do the work you believe in, and you need to try and feed yourself and keep a roof over your head. But like, it's so existential. It really is. Like, there is just nothing but those stories, and you better stand by those stories, which is, as I said, I'm whole with them, but I don't know what to do with, wishing them well in the world with the worry.
Your folks? Both still around?
My mom, my mom's doing well. My father's passed away 10 years ago, and I'm sure that's part of
Kaddish.com.
Yeah, part of the impetus for the book was reflecting on that and reflecting on how my family is. My father was a religious man, and my sister's deeply religious, and we're very close. And I mean, that's what fiction does. Like the book's dedicated to my sister. Like, we get along. I was talking to her on the way over here, and Sarah, was it only yesterday? I can never tell what day it is.
It's a blur.
Yeah. But wasn't last night. It might have been. Anyway, just saw her. But we're really close. But what fiction lets you do is take those differences in a family, or those differences between us, or our true deep theological differences that are gigantic, that we somehow choose, not only just to tolerate, but to like respect each other and be close and make sure our families are close and all that stuff. But, a novel lets you explode that.
Was there, I apologize for not doing the research back from 20 years ago, family tension when you were first publishing? Or along the lines of Philip Roth, the concerns that you were exposing something about, in this case, Orthodox culture.
Well, in this book, like my, sister read it and was super supportive. And it's like, now if you would just take out all the dirty parts, and it was just a sweet conversation to be like, I was like, that's,
I could show my kids this, but
so they are, this goes back to, I think I talked about my mom. Did I mention that she grew up doing art? I don't think
no.
My mom grew up Reform, active Reform. So, to us, we're like, I was raised to think of like there's only one stream of Judaism, only one way to be. But, point is, my grandfather, that man knew how to burn bacon. You know what I'm saying? Like, point is, but she grew up with the arts and married my dad at 18 and got religious, which is what women did, a choice that was made a lot, So anyway, we were raised, with a real, she loves art. Like she's obsessed with art, and we were raised to love art and to love books. And my father, loved books too. But so I think weirdly, even though like my family is so conservative, like for real. And again, we said small c Catholic. Now it's small c conservative, Orthodox with a small c conservative. But, I have to say, if you're making something, they're really understanding about that. Like, they're like, you're making art, you're building a book. Like they really get the idea. Like they're so supportive. It's really beautiful to me. Like, and that doesn't mean they won't be open and being like,
Did you have to put it like this?
Wow, that's shocking. Or, like they say that, or just let me know, make sure I know, like that's too racy or that's inappropriate or whatever. But no, just beyond supportive of my career, my writing. Like my sister's, flying up for the Colson Whitehead reading on, that we're doing at Green Light on launch day. Like, yeah, they're the nephews and they'll all be there. Like that's, so they just have always backed me. It's that idea. As I said, it's not tolerance. It's about respect. We're really different and they support me. And I also think it comes from a pure place. I mean, I don't get to say I'm pure, but I'm saying I can say my intentions are like, I work for someone, there would be an easier way to be, try and be embarrassing or be rebellious. Like the difference between me and the yeshiva student is what I don't wear a yarmulke, or I'm not just studying like these texts. Like I sit with a book like this. How much did I think about Judaism? Like 20 hours a day, day in and day out. Like it is such a laborious process. It's so all consuming. So I don't know what it is, except as you already said, it's just monkish work. So it'd be kind of bizarre to see it as like, oh, what a really rebellious thing to do is just,
I showed them by devoting my life to
devoting my life to questions of, ethics and culture and being and identity through the way I see the world, which is through this lens,
Last real question. The new play. Adapting a short story like the previous one, or is it an original play?
I'm scared to say it out loud. I don't think I've said it out loud. No.
You don't have to say anything.
I'm going to write an original play next,
okay,
which I haven't done yet, but that terrifies me, and therefore I say yes.
Okay.
If it's truly terrifying, then
that's why you got to do it.
Then I'm in. It really scares me. But yes, this is Lincoln Center commissioned what we talk about when we talk about Anne Frank. But yeah, so we did some readings with Lincoln Center, and but it's I think somebody's ready to put it up. So we'll see. Yeah, nothing's signed and finalized and whatever. But I think I'm hoping. Yeah, when the theater announces, I'll announce. But I hope to start working on rewrites or get some more rehearsal time with it soon. Yeah, like I hope. Yeah, maybe the end of maybe 2020.
Don't put a timeline on it. Don't worry, it's okay.
But what we talk about when we talk about Frank is what we talk about when we talk about Frank is an awesome idea. But when we talk about Anne Frank is I adapted that in
because then you get the Richard Ford tie-in also.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Also, Dostoevsky or Tolstoy?
Without pause, it's a shock. You just shocked me. I was like Dostoevsky.
I assumed. I thought maybe you were just going to suddenly throw Gogol in instead. No.
I love Gogol.
Because I did have somebody who said neither. It's Chekhov. And
I love Chekhov. I love Babel. I love Lermontov.
But if you're torn between those two,
some Russians. But no, Gogol's the nose to me. That story is just, amazing. And Babel's the story of my dovecote. That is, masterpiece.
Yeah. What do you go back to most often for reading?
Oh, I go all over, and I'm a really slow reader, so it takes me a long time to read a book. I'm just slow. I just hear it all and
monkish devotion. That's okay.
So I don't. There's a lot of people, friends like, oh yeah, I read that 3 times, or just I read 7. I'm not. My mom's a super fast reader. My wife, like I always literally say, I'll just be annoyed. I'll be like, could you read this email for me? She'll be like, it's great, send it. I was like, I asked you to read it. She's like, I did.
Yeah.
And I literally didn't understand that a person could read that fast and actually comprehend anything. It's very slow and savored and laborious, and maybe, I'm just not that good a reader. I don't know. It takes me a long time.
I think it's a yeshiva thing again. I think you're looking very closely at every word, making sure they all fit.
It really takes me a long time. Point is, so I really dip a lot, and then it's just all over the place. Just when I want to hear a certain voice, if I show you my office floor now, it's covered in books. I'll just be like, how did Nora Ephron sound in Heartburn, and I'll pull it down, and then I'll be like, oh, how did Bukowski start Ham on Rye, or I'll just, just pulling down, Mahfouz, I don't know, just things where I'll be like, how does that sound? and I'll just dip in and get lost. And, stories I'll reread. And, there are certain books, like The Plague I've read a few times, or, Jesus' Son, which takes, even me, 92 minutes.
Right.
Like, I'll read that one again, because I love that collection. And so, but, and it doesn't, I have to say, because I think I must have found them in high school at the library, but I don't know when I started reading Best American Short Stories, when I fell in love with stories. But those, when you talk about the dipping in, it's just really lovely. I haven't had, I've written back-to-back novels, and for me to sit here and tell you that I did that, I mean, it's been I've always worked hard these last years, and I've been parenting. It's been insane, like pushed beyond the edge to like do that. And I was like, I want to maybe I'll write some short stories now before I start the play or whatever. But just pulling my Best Americans off the shelf, which are now, I mean, there's some years missing, but, be like, I'll pull out 87 and then 92 and 2004, and watching the editors change and watching the people included change and seeing how a given year feels. It's like, it's a really nice resource. Literally the other night, I was like, I just pulled a random year. So I read a Wells Tower and then Alice Munro back to back. And for those two to touch, like, I don't know that they would have otherwise touched this Wells Tower story and this Alice Munro story, but reading those two stories back to back, my story wheels were spinning about like structure and timing. And
is there any sense of I'm a short story writer versus I'm a novel writer, or is it for you
I now, why I teach is to like just yell at the students and spare them that time. Those weird things, who cares?
Yeah, that's what I assumed was the case, but I didn't know if that's a...
Well, it used to be, again, I was known for stories. And for a decade, I had one book I was living off 9 stories for 9 years. It's fine that I pulled it off borrowing some cash along the way, but I lived cheap and amassed some debt. But that to me was a thing. But as I said, like as of a few days from now, I'll be like, I have more novels than stories, or, I'm about to have a second play. Like, I think about that. Like, I've translated some, or just as a teacher, like, if every once in a while somebody would be like, Professor Englander, and I'm like, who? And I'm like, that could just be my identity. The pressure on the writing life is so intense. And I was like, you can pick one of these things. And I can just say, like, I'm a playwright now. And I thought it's so freeing, these titles. Like, I would just feel free. Like, maybe I'll just, when I start the play, I'm just going to be like, what do you do? I'm a playwright. Like, once the second one's produced, I've produced 2, like, I've had 2 plays go up. Yeah, I'm a playwright. Like, but the weight that we feel, I just want to give out licenses to everyone. Just do your work. Who cares? The only time it matters, I've come up, because with teaching, I always think, and this is the Jewish thing and the religious thing where I always think of like the other example. Even when I talked about books having a beginning and end, I had to stop. I hear myself talking like, well, of course you could build the endless, like I have to qualify and find the boundaries and test the edges and think it through. But the only time it matters what you call yourself is if you're a memoirist and you're lying. If it's not a memoir, like, don't call it a memoir. Like, that is the only one I could come up with. Everything else, like that's the point. Like, as you said, if you love cottage.com and you come and say like, well, you call it a novel, I call it a novella. Great. Did you have a good experience? Like, are you changed at all? Did you go somewhere else? Like, do you care about, Shuli and Miri's family? Like, that's my, it's not out of my control.
Nathan, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. What a pleasure.
And that was Nathan Englander. His new novel, Kaddish.com, is out this week from Knopf. I enjoyed the heck out of it. I think that comes across in our episode. And like we talked about, it's Jewish, but its themes are accessible to any audience. Now, Nathan's website is www.kaddish.com. I'm just kidding, not Kaddish.com. NathanEnglander.com, which is NathanEnglander. So EnglandER.com. He's on Twitter as Nathan Englander, all one word, and on Facebook and Instagram as N Englander. He doesn't do a ton on social media, which may tie into that set of comments about avoiding the static, as he put it. Now, also, I want to thank my pal and past pod guest, Zach Martin, for starting the ball rolling on this episode back in 2017. He studied under Nathan and told me, he would make a really good guest, and was the initial point of contact for us. And I also want to thank him and past guest Christopher Ballin, who interviewed Nathan for Interview Magazine, for offering up some good questions this time around. Now, after we wrapped, I asked Nathan, so, who you been reading? If you want to hear his answer to that and get some extra conversation, you'll need to become a supporter of the Virtual Memories Show so you can get access to our quarterly bonus podcast, Fear of a Square Planet. The first quarter 2019 episode will be up soon. Fourth quarter 2018 features book recommendations and extra conversation with Eddie Campbell, Nora Krug, Jason Lutz, Summer Pierre, David Small, Mark Derry, Michael Gerber, Angela Himsell, Kathy B. Graham, Shahar Pinsker, and Bill Cardilopoulos. You can support the Virtual Memories Show via patreon.com/VMSpod or paypal.me/VMSpod. I've got all sorts of goals and goodies in place for patrons, including that podcast, a patron-only blog, handwritten show notes for every episode, my secret project, which the two guests I recorded with this week, Mark Allen Stamety and David Shields, have sort of inspired me to get back to, and more. So go to patreon.com/VMSpod and support the art of fine conversation. I should also add that Nathan, with the entire message of do the work, is also kind of inspiring about getting back and doing the work and making my secret project happen. Anyway, I recorded this episode at an undisclosed location in Brooklyn, but I parked at my favorite garage on the Upper West Side and took the subway all the way out there. So it was the usual toll at the GW, it was peak hours, probably about $15 with Easy Pass, about $30 for parking, another $6 for the subway. I also grabbed a coffee at Blue Bottle nearby, but hey. So if you want to help defray some of the costs of the Virtual Memories Show, like web hosting, travel, equipment, coffee, or just toss me some money because you think the show is worth it, then visit patreon.com/VMSpod or paypal.me/VMSpod and make a one-time or recurring donation. A special thanks go out to Nick Bartosik, Michael Hacker, Michael Janizik, Fred Kish, Jonathan Kranz, Jack Lescamella, Teresa Lewis, Stephen Nadler, Jim Ottaviani, Payne Prophet, Dmitry Samarov, Stephen Solomon, Craig P. Steffen, Greg Tanner, Ford Thomas, and Garrett Zecker for going over and above in their support of the Virtual Memories Show. We have the full list of show supporters at chimeraobscura.com/VM. Our music for this episode is Fella by Hal Mayforth, used with permission from the artist. You can check out my episode with Hal from the summer of 2018 and listen to his music at soundcloud.com/Mayforth. And that's MAY4TH. And that's it for this week's episode of the Virtual Memories Show. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next week with Mark Allen Stamety around the 40th anniversary of his book, MacDoodle Street. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show and download past episodes at the iTunes Store. You can also find all our episodes and get on our email list at either of our websites, vmspod.com or chimeraobscura.com/VM. You can also follow the Virtual Memories Show on Twitter and Instagram at VMSpod, at virtualmemoriespodcast.tumblr.com, and on YouTube, Spotify, and TuneIn.com by searching for Virtual Memories Show. And if you like this podcast, please tell your pals, tell people on social media, and go to iTunes, look up the Virtual Memories Show, and leave a rating and maybe even a review for us. It all goes to helping us build a bigger audience. You've been listening to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth. Keep reading, keep making art, and keep the conversation going.